The coffee maker was the only thing making noise. Margaret had bought it herself 8 months ago, after the old one started leaking onto the counter, and her mother kept forgetting to mention it. She'd driven 40 minutes on a Saturday morning, chosen a model that was simple enough, large buttons, no complicated settings, and set it up before her mother woke from her nap. That Saturday felt like 100 other Saturdays, unremarkable in the way that necessary things usually are. Now Daniel was standing next to it, not using it, talking about the credenza in the hallway. "It's solid oak," he said. To no one in particular. "I looked it up, that style, that age. You're looking at real value." Connie was at the kitchen table with her phone out, photographing the jewelry their mother had kept in a ceramic dish by the window. Small things, a pearl bracelet. 2 rings Margaret didn't recognize and one she did. The thin gold band their mother had stopped wearing after her fingers swelled. The one she'd asked Margaret to keep safe in the drawer of the nightstand where Margaret could actually find it when it was needed. Margaret poured herself a cup of coffee and stood near the window. Outside, the neighbor's dog was moving slow circles in the yard. The maple tree her mother had always meant to have trimmed had finally dropped large branch onto the fence sometime in the night. Margaret made a note to call someone about it. Then she remembered that it wasn't technically something she needed to schedule anymore. Then she wasn't sure that was true either. She was tired in a way that had no clean word for it. Daniel and Connie had flown in the morning of the funeral. They'd been kind at the service. Genuinely, she thought. Daniel had cried at the graveside in a way that embarrassed him, and she hadn't made anything of it. Grief wasn't a competition. She understood that people mourn according to their distance, and distance takes many forms. But by the afternoon, something had shifted. It happened the way these things do, not with a declaration, but with a gradual rearrangement of behavior. A comment about the dining set, a question about whether the artwork had been appraised. Connie mentioning almost offhandedly that their cousin Renata had said the house could list for significantly more now, given the neighborhood. Margaret had nodded and gone to check on the food. She'd heard versions of this before. Not the specifics, but the rhythm of it, the way absence tends to arrive eventually with opinions. For 3 years she had driven here on weekends, sometimes weekdays when the situation required it. She had organized the medications into a weekly pill sorter, and then reorganized them when the prescriptions changed. She had sat in waiting rooms with paperwork. She had learned the names of the home health aides and remembered their preferences, and called to check when someone didn't show. She had held her mother's hand through 2 hospitalizations and 1 procedure that was minor on paper and not minor in reality. Her siblings had sent cards. Connie had called every Sunday, usually for about 12 minutes. Daniel had visited twice, once at Thanksgiving, once in March, when he happens to have a work trip nearby. She didn't hold it against them exactly. Lives are full. Distance is real. She had chosen to be close, and choosing means something. But she had noticed, in the way you notice things you decide not to say, that nobody had asked her how she was managing. Not before, not now. The lawyer arrived at 3:58. His name was Gerald Marsh, and he had a calm, unhurried way of entering a room that Margaret had always found reassuring. She'd first met him 11 months ago, when her mother had asked her to come to an appointment without explaining what the appointment was for. She'd sat across from him in his office on a Tuesday afternoon, while her mother, clearer than she'd been in months, had walked through the decisions she'd already made. The house, transferred, the accounts partially restructured into a payable-on-death arrangement. Her reasons stated plainly, "I know who was here. I want the paperwork to match what's true." Margaret had tried to object. Her mother had looked at her with the patience of someone who has already finished the conversation internally. The notary had come and gone. Margaret had driven home in the early evening and sat in her car for a while before going inside. Gerald set his bag on the kitchen table, next to Connie's coffee cup, and opened a folder. He was professional and precise. He explained the estate summary in plain language, as he always did. He referenced the death certificate, the will on file, the assets covered within it. Then he noted, as a matter of record, the items that fell outside the estate. The house had been transferred to Margaret 11 months prior via a deed that had been properly recorded with the county. He named the date. He referenced the document number. The accounts designated payable on death had already been settled according to the beneficiary designations on file. He looked up once briefly, then returned to his folder. Daniel had gone very still. Connie set her phone face down on the table. The room held a particular kind of silence, not empty, but full of things no one knew how to begin saying. Margaret looked at her coffee cup. Gerald asked if there were questions about the probate process for the items that remained in the estate, some personal belongings, a small savings account, the car. His tone did not change. He had delivered paperwork into difficult rooms before. Connie said, "So the house is not part of the estate," Gerald said. Another silence. Daniel turned toward Margaret slowly, as if recalibrating something. She met his eyes. She didn't look away, but she didn't add anything either. There was nothing to add. The documents existed, the months existed, the Saturdays existed, all of them, whether or not anyone had counted. Gerald finished his review and left by 4:30. Margaret washed the coffee cups after her siblings went to gather their things from the guest room. The maple branch was still on the fence. The neighbor's dog had gone inside. She stood at the sink for a while, looking at nothing in particular. She didn't feel victorious. She felt tired, and then, beneath the tired, something smaller and more durable, the quiet satisfaction of a thing being accurate, of the record reflecting what had actually happened. Her mother had known who was in the room. The paperwork had simply confirmed it.